The text arrived on a Thursday at 11:14 a.m. while I was eating lunch at my desk. I had a half-eaten sandwich in one hand and a spreadsheet open on my second monitor when my phone buzzed. I glanced down out of habit. The preview showed Diane's name. I set the sandwich down. Clara, going forward you are not welcome at Sterling Lake Resort for any family functions or personal visits. This is a family decision and it's final. Please don't make this difficult. I read it twice. My chest went very still. Not hurt, not indignant, not anything with a clean name, just a particular kind of quiet that I recognized from years of working with numbers that didn't add up. The kind of quiet that meant, look closer. I set my phone face down on the desk. I opened my laptop. I navigated to the loan servicer portal I'd been logging into every quarter for 3 years and looked at the account summary. Sterling Lake Resort, LLC. Outstanding principal, $734,000. Note holder, CMG Holdings, LLC. CMG Holdings, LLC was me. I finished my sandwich. Then I went back to my spreadsheet. My father built Sterling Lake Resort the way he built most things, slowly, carefully, without announcing it. He bought the land in Harwick County when I was 7 years old, a parcel of scrub oak and lake frontage that nobody else wanted because the access road washed out every spring. He fixed the road himself the first 2 summers, gravel by gravel, before he poured a single foundation. I grew up watching him work. By the time I was in high school, the resort had 6 cabins and a small lodge. By the time I graduated college with an accounting degree, it had 14 cabins, a renovated boathouse, and a dining terrace overlooking the water that my father had leveled by hand with a transit level he borrowed from a neighbor and never returned. He married Diane when I was 26. She was warm in the way that resort managers learn to be warm, attentive to comfort, skilled at making people feel seen without ever actually seeing them. I didn't dislike her. I told myself I didn't dislike her. She had 2 sons from a previous marriage, Clark and Brett, who were 29 and 31 and had never worked a job that required them to be somewhere before 9. My father died 18 months after the wedding. Pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless. He was 61. 3 weeks after the funeral, I sat in the office of his attorney, a careful man named Walter Osei who had handled my father's affairs for over a decade. Walter slid a single document across the desk. He explained that my father had restructured the resort's financing 2 years before his death. The property itself, the land, the buildings, the boathouse, passed to the estate and then to Diane per the will. But the promissory note attached to the resort's outstanding mortgage had been assigned separately, through a legal instrument my father had signed and filed with the Harwick County Clerk's office. He had assigned it to a holding company. The holding company was mine, set up in my name, funded with a portion of an insurance policy that predated the marriage. He wanted you to have a stake that couldn't be contested, Walter told me. Something structural. I drove home with the county envelope on the passenger seat. I didn't open it again for a week. When I did, I read every page twice, the way my father had taught me to read anything that mattered. For the 3 years between my father's death and Diane's text message, I did what I had always done at Sterling Lake. I handled the resort's quarterly tax filings, coordinating with the accountant Diane had hired who understood hospitality revenue but not the specific depreciation schedules my father had been running since the boathouse renovation. I caught 2 filing errors in the first year that would have triggered an audit. I corrected them without sending an invoice. I renegotiated the resort's linen service contract when the vendor raised rates by 18% mid-season. The new rate came in 6% below the original. Diane acknowledged this in a group text to the family with a single thumbs-up emoji. When a pipe froze in cabin 7 during a February cold snap and the repair estimate came in at $11,200, I called 3 additional contractors, found one at $6,800 who could start the same week, and coordinated the booking transfers for the 2 families who had reservations that weekend. I drove up to Harwick County on a Saturday to manage it in person because Clark said he had prior commitments and Brett didn't answer his phone. I covered a $18,340 shortfall in the resort's operating account one August, when occupancy dropped after a regional music festival was canceled and the advance deposits had already been spent. I transferred the funds from my personal account. Diane paid me back 4 months later, after I mentioned it a second time. None of this was heroic. I did it because my father built the place, and because someone with a working knowledge of the numbers needed to be paying attention, and because I was the only person in the family who fit that description. What I did not do was put my name on any of it. There were no emails that said I fixed this or you should thank me for that. My father had taught me that the work was the record. The work would show. What I failed to account for was that the work would be reassigned in the retelling. By the second year after my father's death, Diane had begun describing the resort's operational improvements as things that we had implemented, a we that clearly meant herself and her sons. Clark had taken to referring to himself as the resort's general manager at family gatherings, a title that had not existed before and that no one had formally given him. Brett handled what he called guest experience, which appeared to consist of being present at the bar on weekend evenings and comping drinks to people he liked. The work I had done was still in the filing cabinet, in the contracts, in the corrected tax returns. It was not in any story anyone was telling. The gathering was Diane's idea. She called it a summer planning session, which meant she had reserved the Lakeview Terrace for a Saturday afternoon in late June and invited the extended family. Her sister and brother-in-law, 2 of my father's cousins, Clark's girlfriend, and 3 couples who were longtime resort guests and had apparently been elevated to the status of family friends. I drove up from Bellwood because not attending would have required an explanation I didn't want to give. I wore a blue linen shirt and drove with the windows down and didn't think about the text message, which I had not responded to, because Diane had sent it 6 weeks earlier and then apparently decided that silence meant acceptance. The terrace was set with white tablecloths and pitchers of iced tea. My father's cousins waved when I arrived. I found a seat at the near end of the table, next to his cousin Richard, who was 72 and had bad knees and always asked me about my work with what seemed like genuine interest. Diane waited until the food had been served. She had a gift for timing. She stood up from the head of the table and held her iced tea glass in a way that wasn't quite a toast but occupied the same gesture space. She began talking about the resort's future. About the improvements Clark and Brett had been driving. About the vision for the next 5 years. She used the word stewardship twice. Then she looked at me. "Clara," she said, "I did send you a message. About the going forward arrangement." The table went quiet in the way that tables go quiet when something that should have been private is being made public. "I know you did," I said. "We feel it's best if the family side of things stays with the people who are actually invested in the resort's future," she said. Gerald would have understood that. He was very practical. Something drew tight across my shoulders. Not anger, not grief, not anything I could have named at a dinner table, just a specific pressure, like a joint bearing weight it wasn't designed for. "Diane," I said. "We appreciate everything you've done." "We do. But there's a point where holding on becomes." She paused, and I watched her find the word she had clearly chosen in advance, ungrateful. "To the people who are here, doing the actual work." Clark nodded from across the table. "We've been carrying a lot, Clara. It's not personal." "It never is," I said. Brett set his fork down. "Look, Dad left the property to Mom. That's what the will said. You got your share. This is how it has to be." "I understand what the will said," I told him. "Then you understand why this is awkward," Clark said. "You keep showing up. You keep inserting yourself into operations. It's confusing for staff. It's confusing for guests." "I filed your tax returns," I said. "That's the last time I inserted myself." "Gerald did the accounting," Diane said, with a warmth that made the inaccuracy feel like a gift she was giving me. "He was so good at all of that." I looked at her. She looked back at me with an expression of complete, composed sincerity. I picked up my iced tea. I took a drink. Richard beside me was very still. "You're right that Gerald was good at it," I said. I put the glass down. I excused myself to use the restroom. I stood in the tiled hallway inside the lodge for 40 seconds, my hand flat against the cool wall, before I walked back out to the table and sat down and finished my meal. Nobody said anything else to me directly for the rest of the afternoon. I drove back to Bellwood that evening. I merged onto the county road. The sky was still light, a flat pale blue that hadn't decided to go dark yet. The fields on either side of the road ran long and uninterrupted, and I drove through them without thinking about Diane or Clark or Brett or the look on Richard's face when I'd sat back down at the table. I passed the grain elevator outside Grantham. A single truck was parked at the loading dock with its hazard lights on, orange flashing slow and even against the early dusk. I watched it in my rearview mirror until I couldn't anymore. I crossed the Harwick County line. I stopped at a gas station in Bellwood and filled my tank. I watched the numbers scroll on the pump display. I replaced the nozzle. I went inside and bought a bottle of water and stood at the counter while the attendant, a teenager who had his earbuds in, scanned it without looking up. I drove the last 4 minutes home. I parked in my garage. The garage light clicked on automatically and then buzzed and went dark, the way it had been doing for 6 months. I had not replaced the bulb. I went inside. I stood in the kitchen for a moment. The counter was clean. The coffee maker showed the time, 7:52 p.m. I hadn't eaten anything since the terrace. I opened the refrigerator and looked at it and closed it again. I went to the second bedroom, which I use as an office. The desk lamp was still on from the morning. I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. The drawer stuck slightly on the left side the way it always had, and I lifted and pulled at the same time the way I'd learned to. I found the cream-colored county envelope at the back of the hanging folder labeled Marsh Estate. It had been there since the week after Walter's office. The envelope's flap was still tucked in, not sealed. I had opened it once, read every page, and tucked the flap back the same way it came. I lifted it out. I set it on the desk. The desk lamp threw a narrow circle of light. The embossed stamp in the top left corner was visible from where I stood. I looked at it for a moment. Then I turned off the lamp. I did not open it that night. I was back at Sterling Lake the following morning at 9 o'clock. I asked the front desk staff member, a young woman named Priya who had worked there 2 seasons and always said good morning with what seemed like relief, if Diane was available. Priya called up to the main residence. She listened. She looked at me with careful eyes. She says she's in a meeting, Priya told me. I'll wait, I said. I sat in one of the lodge chairs near the window overlooking the water. I waited 22 minutes. Diane came down with Clark behind her and Brett a few steps behind him, which told me the meeting had been the 3 of them deciding how to handle this. Clara, Diane said. We said what we needed to say yesterday. I know, I said. I have something I'd like to show you. This isn't the time. It won't take long, I said. I reached into my bag. I took out the cream-colored county envelope, the clerk's embossed stamp pressed into the top left corner, slightly off-center, the ink faintly purple in the lodge's morning light. I set it on the low table between us. Then I opened my laptop, navigated to the loan servicer portal, and turned the screen so that Diane, Clark, and Brett could see it clearly. Sterling Lake Resort, LLC. Outstanding principal, $734,000. Note holder, CMG Holdings, LLC. I let them read it. CMG Holdings is mine, I said. Has been for 3 years. Your mortgage payments come to me. Diane looked at the screen. Then at the envelope. Then at me. That's not possible, she said. The assignment was filed with the Harwick County Clerk 2 years before Dad died, I said. Walter Osei handled it. The document is in that envelope. You're welcome to have your attorney verify it. Gerald would never, Diane started. He did, I said. He was very practical. Clark stepped forward. What does this mean, practically? It means the note is mine, I said. The property is yours. The debt instrument is mine. Every payment you make comes to my holding company. You can't call the note, Brett said. You can't just. I haven't done anything, I said. I'm telling you what exists. Clark's jaw tightened. He looked at Brett. Brett looked at the laptop screen and then away from it, the way you look away from something you don't want to have understood. This is a legal matter, Clark said, his voice shifting into a register I recognized, the careful, slowed-down version of his voice that meant he was recalibrating. We'll need to have our attorney look at this. That's reasonable, I said. Walter Osei's information is in the county filing. He's been practicing in Harwick County for over 20 years. He's easy to reach. Diane had not moved. She was looking at me with an expression I had not seen on her before. Not composed sincerity, not warm management, but something stripped of its performance, something that was simply trying to understand what it was looking at. You've been receiving our payments, she said finally. For 3 years. And you never said anything. No, I said. Why? She said. Why are you telling us this now? Because you texted me that I wasn't welcome here, I said. And I wanted you to have accurate information. She looked at me for a long moment. The composure was still there, but it was working harder than usual. She stopped. You said holding on is ungrateful, I said. To the people who are actually here, doing the actual work. I let that sit for one breath. My father thought the work was the record. He was right. He just made sure the record was filed in the right place. I closed the laptop. I picked up the county envelope and put it back in my bag. I'm not calling the note. I'm not changing the payment schedule. I'm not doing anything you haven't asked me to do, which is stay out of your way. I stood up. I'll see myself out. I walked past Priya at the front desk. She said good morning again. I said it back. 8 months later, I was sitting at the desk in my home office in Bellwood when Clark called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that said Diane wanted to discuss some financial matters related to the resort and that they hoped we could get on the same page. His voice was careful in a way it had never been careful when he was talking to me across a dining terrace with a table full of witnesses. I didn't call back. The cream-colored county envelope sat in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, behind the hanging folder, where it had been since the morning I brought it home from Walter Osei's office. I took it out sometimes, not often, maybe 4 or 5 times in the 3 years since the assignment was filed, and held it the way you hold something that settled a question you didn't know needed settling. The embossed stamp was cool under my thumb. Slightly raised. Permanent. My father used to say that the most durable things are the ones nobody can see until they need to. He meant it about foundations, he was talking about concrete, about load-bearing walls, about the grade of gravel under a road that washes out. But he was also, I understood now, talking about this. Sterling Lake was still running. The quarterly payments arrived in the CMG Holdings account with the same regularity they always had. I didn't track Diane's operational decisions or Clark's management choices or what Brett did on weekend evenings. It was their resort. The property was theirs. The note was mine. There's a specific kind of patience that doesn't feel like patience while you're practicing it. It just feels like doing your job, keeping your record straight, trusting that the work is the record. My father built that road 1 load of gravel at a time before he poured a single foundation. He knew what he was building toward. He just didn't announce it. I keep the envelope in the bottom drawer. I don't need to look at it often. But I know exactly where it is. If this story reminded you of something, someone who did the work while others took the credit, share it with them. Some people need to hear that the record doesn't disappear just because no one's reading it yet.